to the September meeting of the Ann Arbor Human Rights Commission.
Okay, I see. Yes.
Let's
Good afternoon.
start by introducing ourselves, and since the pictures change, let me call your names. Keita, do you want to start?
Hi, I'm Keita Cowan, HRC Commissioner.
Linda?
Hi, Linda Winkler, Commissioner.
Dilip?
Hi, I'm Dilip Das, Commissioner.
Aisha?
Hi, I'm Aisha Ghazi, Edwin, Commissioner.
Can't hear you.
Oh,
You're muted.
hi, I'm Aisha Ghazi, Edwin, Commissioner. Can you guys hear me?
Okay.
Judah?
Judah Garber, Commissioner.
Elizabeth?
Elizabeth Nelson, City Council Liaison, non-voting member.
Julie?
Julie Grand, the other City Council liaison.
And Pam? We just got a picture. Sort of.
I see her here.
Hi, Pam. Guess she's not going to. And
Okay.
I didn't, Anna, you do want to just introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Anna. I'm a senior at the University of Michigan. I'm also from Ann Arbor. And I'm a guest here today to
Thank you.
speak a little bit.
We'll give you a better introduction later. Denise.
Good afternoon. I'm the staff liaison for the Human Rights Commission, and I'm so glad to be back and see everyone. I miss you all.
Missed you too. Pam?
Yes, hi, I'm Pam Dent, Commissioner.
And I'm Leslie Stambaugh, and I'm Commissioner and Chair.
Okay.
We begin this meeting with open comments, and anybody, Denise, why don't you give the statement about who to call?
Did we miss Diana?
Did we? I'm sorry, I think we did. Diana, I'm sorry.
Hi, I'm Diana Cass, Commissioner. I was just laying low.
Denise, you want to make a public comment statement?
Oh, yes, you have, if there are any call-ins, you can call the toll number, and that number is on the invitation, and you may have 3 minutes of time to make a public comment. And let's see, I wanted to make sure that I have that number available again in case anybody needs it. Hold on. I'll put that up shortly.
I just wanted to make a quick comment for everybody. I was part of a Washtenaw County Commission Board meeting a month ago, which was bombed by outsiders with both, racist and misogynist comments in the chat section. So I don't know what they've done since that time, but it was extremely offensive and disturbing. And it was a Zoom call just like this, and public. So I just wanted to warn us as a commission that could happen with us as well.
Oh, that's sad. No. Well, I changed this morning because we just want to use the toll number of +1 213 338 8477 if anyone wants to call in with public comment. And that's a toll, not a toll free, just a toll number. And that's the one we have to use for Zoom until further notice.
As we're waiting for people, let me ask you, Denise, can you block any calls that are obviously bombing the commission?
I can see what comes in, so I can see if I can stop that with my more control over here. Okay. But I can see any and everything that's coming in so far.
Good.
Okay.
Do you see
I
any
would try.
calls? Huh?
No, I don't see any calls presently.
And we
Okay.
also don't have a chat function that's operational on our city Zooms, if you'll notice. So,
Yes, I don't see that, right?
so I think that was intentional, even
Okay.
though it limits some of our ability to communicate.
Yeah, for the Washtenaw County Commissioners meeting, that was where the offense is in the chat section.
Ah, and we
Oh,
don't,
okay.
It's
we
great
don't
that
have
we
that
don't have it.
capability? Good. Okay. Well, then let's move on, and if anybody calls, we can interrupt. We're going to start with a guest presentation. And Aisha, I'd like to ask you to, you set this up, and I'd like to ask you to introduce Anna to us. But you have to mute yourself. Unmute.
Can you guys hear me? I think there might be something going on with my speakers.
And talk louder, I think.
We can hear you, but you're very soft.
Yeah.
I'm going to try to move closer to my computer. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
So Anna, I want to welcome you. Thank you for coming. Anna is the president of the United Asian American Organization nationally and very involved in anti-discrimination efforts against Asian Americans on campus, working with staff. And she wanted to come here and share a few words just about her experience growing up in Ann Arbor, and how she feels Asian American sentiment should be kind of on our way. Hopefully you guys heard that.
Very much.
Okay.
Anna, welcome.
So I wrote a few words, so I'm just going to read all that, but thank you for that introduction and giving me space to speak today. So hello, everyone. My name is Anna, and I'm an alum of Wines Elementary School, Forsyth Middle School, and Skyline High School. Now I am a senior at the University of Michigan. At U of M, I will graduate as the first ethnic studies submajor after fighting for an ethnic studies major that did not exist. I am also the president of our largest Asian American advocacy organization. And I'd also like to thank Aisha for connecting me with the HRC today. So Aisha and I met on the Stop API Hate Task Force at U of M that kind of came together ad hoc over the summer. It was a group of faculty, staff, and students that came together during a time of, increased bias towards Asian Americans and Asians during the COVID outbreak. And I reached out to her because she could help me with action following the statement from Christopher Taylor back in the spring. His video statement condemned anti-Asian hate, especially during COVID-19, and he explicitly mentioned bullying. That caused me to recall my days in the Ann Arbor public school system as an Asian American student. And I think that that is a crucial place for the city of Ann Arbor to put its energy in not only condemning, but also addressing racism. With my experiences, sorry about my notifications, with my experience or with my opportunities in ethnic studies at U of M, I can see that its anti-racist curriculum is an efficient pathway to equip young folks to address racism in Ann Arbor through lifting political suppression from students of color. My experiences as a Vietnamese American and Asian American inform this opinion. So I am the daughter, granddaughter, and great-granddaughter of Vietnamese refugees. So I exist as a Vietnamese American because of the forced migration of my ancestors to the very country that violently displaced us from our homeland. My American residence was not a choice at the choice of my Vietnamese ancestors. And I have no choice but to think of my existence as a Vietnamese American as political. As a product of American imperialism, I need ethnic studies, the home of critical race theory, post-colonial theory, and critical refugee theory, to understand and heal from the politicized premise to my existence. I knew this in my K-12 education at AAPS, but I did not have the words for it because the lacking ethnic studies curriculum did not put its necessity into my developing vernacular. At Wines, Forsyth, and Skyline, I come from the perspective of being one of the only Viet students and also belonging to a larger Asian American population at a predominantly white school. In both my experience of my ethnicity and race, it is not the responsibilities of others with shared identities to educate me on my political identity as they come to understand their identities themselves. It is the job of my education system, one that claims to champion diversity, to uplift my understanding of self in the point of diversity that I bring to the school, if I will even begin to connect with my peers at a level of leading racial and ethnic identity. In other words, I should not have been a Viet body at AAPS to decorate its historically white curriculum, but rather the curriculum should have addressed my Vietnamese American and Asian American existences. That is how to create curriculum that embraces the students of color at our schools. Experiences with my Vietnamese American identity in elementary, middle, and high school have enabled me to both understand the need for ethnic studies in AAPS as well as envision what purpose it would play. One prominent example of this is when I chose to do my US history project in middle school about the Vietnamese boat people. I pulled out the whole 9 yards, performing oral histories, putting together a snazzy presentation, and doing research. Through this project, I understood myself as the descendant of Vietnamese refugees that settled in the US. The class was not only intrigued by this war memory that was contrary to the Eurocentric Vietnam War education. I, however, got points off with the comment that this was not American history. Refugees in crisis because of American imperialism, also saved to justify American imperialism, were claimed to not be American history. This story is indicative to the need of ethnic studies curriculum that not only would have been beneficial in my self-advocacy, but also in providing a pathway to leadership. If we had had an ethnic studies curriculum at our schools, my teachers could have pointed me in the direction of understanding my political identity further and beginning my journey of internal understanding of self that would bolster how I would support my fellow Asian American students. Instead, I was made to feel as though I do not belong. I was made to suppress my political identity. I got a lot out of my high school, middle school, and elementary school curriculum. I had a sense of what dominant American history stories. I played sports. I joined the forensics team to learn public speaking, and countless other educational experiences. However, the choice to do ethnic studies, the choice to understand my political identity, the choice to hone in on how to lead Asian Americans, that choice was not there. And that happens to be the choice I was meant to make for my college career and life after that. The lack of that choice suppressed my anti-racist agenda, embedded my politicized existence at a young age. Thus, AAPS did not know how to support me from a young age in that pursuit. So then I come to the question, how are we empowering all students, including Black, Indigenous, Pacific Islander, Latinx, Arab American, Asian American students, to create their own intentional autonomous spaces while being able to turn to the school for their support? It is one thing to condemn racism, and it is another to empower students of color to do that. Christopher Taylor has addressed anti-Asian hate in our Ann Arbor community, and pushing ethnic studies curriculum in AAPS puts systemic change to those words. And I'd also like to conclude with thanking the HRC again for hearing excerpts of my experience. And I hope that this starts some conversations with the city.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there questions for Anna?
I have a question. Hi, Anna, I'm Linda. Have you approached the Ann Arbor Public Schools or tried to speak to the school board?
No, so that is why I'm talking to you today, because I don't know how to do that.
I mean, the jurisdiction gets a little fuzzy between us and the city and the Ann Arbor Public Schools, which doesn't mean we can't weigh in.
Anna, I'm curious about one question. If you had your ideal resolution, what would you like us to do? If it were in your power to make it happen, what would be ideal?
Sure. I would employ ethnic studies curriculums, which is based on, student activism in the 60s. So that's how colleges got Black American studies, Latina or Latinx studies, Asian American studies, Arab American studies, and Native American studies at those schools. And I would want the city to, work with experts, whether they be at the university or other high schools that have employed these curriculums at the Ann Arbor public schools. And that's something kind of to start from a young age. And then also these curriculums I know are also applicable to teachers.
Okay. Are you familiar with some of these curricula?
At the moment, I wouldn't say so. I have colleagues who are much more researched in the high school curriculums.
Okay. No, that's fair. You can't be an expert on all of it.
I'd like to know, Anna, how we could become more user-friendly to Asian American students. Do they, for example, if they feel like they're being harassed or treated unfairly on the streets of Ann Arbor, for example, how can we let them know that we are here to help them?
Yeah. Do you mean we as in like the HRC or just like
Human Rights Commission? Yes.
In general. Well, I guess I will start with saying like it is a broadly systemic issue. And so, I think that HRC can help by, having a safe place to report and, a way to extend resources that's designed for high schoolers. So, high schoolers, but that would require, Asian American students at those high schools to be, leading spaces for Asian American students in a very political way, and so I think that it starts with having the infrastructure for students to be able to take on that type of leadership and even know how to take on that type of leadership.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just going to follow up on a comment that Linda made about the Ann Arbor School Board. It's very easy to speak with them. Anybody can speak with them, and it's now online. You get 4 minutes, I believe. You sign up, even a minute or a couple minutes before. You can do it the day before. You can do it a week before. And you speak your mind about specific topics. And it's very easy to do. So I do encourage you to take your 4 minutes in front of the school board and take it more than once. You can speak every month if you wish. And sometimes that's what it takes.
Sure. I just have a question. I'm wondering if like that process could be easier if like HRC connected me or like, suggested me. Because I know today in talking to you all, it was a lot easier because like I knew Aisha. So yeah, I was wondering if that is like a type of process.
I can certainly connect you. Yeah, I can certainly send you the info and connect you to that process. It's really easy. And if you want, I can even introduce you to a board member if that would help you as well.
I could do the same, Anna. Do we have your contact information?
Yes, I have. I think I have it.
Okay. And I want to congratulate you on your being able to establish that major, or that's quite an accomplishment. When just a personal remembrance, when I was in high school, I went to a school that was about a third Black students, about a third Jewish students. And at the time, they managed to create some Black studies classes that didn't exist previously. And then my brother was very into being Jewish and created a Jewish studies class, and then went to Washington U, where he helped push to create the major that didn't previously exist. So it's really amazing what a few people can do if they push hard enough.
Yeah, thank you for that.
It occurs to me also, I know that obviously you're surrounded by students. I don't know if any of your friends are in the School of Education. The students in the School of Education are doing student teaching in the Ann Arbor Public Schools, and I did this fairly recently, like in the last 5-6 years, and there was a social studies curriculum, and it strikes me that some of the professors at the School of Education who are teaching how to teach social studies might be interested in hearing from you and maybe developing a project for their student interns to do. I had specific projects that I had to do in the topic of social studies district competency, and anyway, that was something else that was going through my head hearing you speak so eloquently about how much you care about this and how much it matters.
Yeah, thank you for that. I actually am very not connected to the School of Education.
All right. Well, I'm gonna dig through who I know and what I know in that school, because I know a little bit to point you in the right direction.
Right. Well, thank you.
And can I just say, hi, I'm Julie. I'm one of the council members, and so I would just say, in terms of speaking in front of the school board, like as someone who's listened to a lot of public comment, like I am personally always so happy when young people come from our community to speak, and we tend to hear from the same people in the community over and over and over again, and good for them and their persistence, but it's important to hear young voices and informed, passionate young voices. So I wouldn't be concerned about going in front of any elected body. Like, it's going to be, I think, a really supportive environment. And it sounds like Leslie's going to send your contact info, or Aisha's going to send it to all of us, and I'll think about what Elizabeth was saying too. I'm an advisor at the university, so I may have a couple ideas about classes that might be some good connections too. Do you see it being like more curricular or extracurricular, this push in the schools? Like, do you see the first steps being like the equivalent? I know there are problems with it. I'm not saying it's perfect, but like the race and ethnicity requirement at Michigan to graduate, or do you see it being more about creating spaces for students outside of the classroom?
Well, I think that it's both. So I wouldn't say necessarily like the race and ethnicity requirement, because that is something that, I don't know, in conversations doesn't necessarily address like students who want to specialize in and like pursue ethnic studies. It's kind of like, a requirement that everyone takes, kind of similar to a training. But, creating classes specifically for students who are interested in that topic, I think is good, and also would spark extracurricular spaces. But I think that, showing the institutional support and the institutional creation of, intentional spaces would be, would kind of start that process.
Thank you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, thank you for being here. And you will hear from us. Thank you. The next thing on our agenda is the minutes from last meeting. Here they are. Are there any comments, changes, additions, or subtractions to the minutes? Remember that the minutes will also have attached to them the NAACP statement on criminal justice improvements in race. If there's no discussion, would somebody make a motion to approve the minutes?
I don't see my name on the minutes.
I don't see your name.
I swear I was here at this meeting. but I'm not even, I'm not,
Not absent. Thank you. Glad you.
and once my name gets added, I'm happy to move that we approve the minutes with that addition.
That sounds good. Anything else?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Minutes are approved. Next on the agenda, sort of an overview of what we're doing. Seeing as we're kind of all separate in our own space, own safe spaces. Trespass. Let me just tell you what I know about what's happening for trespass. As you know, we've got a group of people that includes Judah, Linda, and Pam, and myself, and we're meeting jointly with 4 members of the Oversight Commission to talk about trespass. We have come up with a memo, a draft of a memo to the chief, sort of asking for a meeting to discuss, to look at the issues that we've identified about trespass. And in this process, the Oversight Commission has decided to reach out to some people who are bigger stakeholders in trespass, like the library, Lake Transit Center, the shelter,
Avalon.
the shelters, and the Avalon Housing. Yeah, right. So far, they have talked to the last meeting that I attended. They talked to Avalon and to the library, and just so that you know where we're going with this, they're really they're very comfortable with everything we've got, but they're very clear on the same things that we were concerned about when we were the main lead on the trespass issue, and that is the 1 year across the board banishment from the property when somebody's trespassed. People want a lot of they want the owner to be able to specify a day, a week, a month, or a year. Some things really do require a year, and they've got some good reason for it, but most of them are shorter in term. So that's where we're going. We've still got people who are going to go and talk to Avalon, and to maybe other housing, and to shelters. And then we probably will meet and set up a date, but we'll keep you informed about that. The Fairchad's access to housing ordinance we've been working on. Linda, you want to talk about that one, where we are?
Sure. Leslie sent the draft of the ordinance that we sort of all tentatively approved as a working draft to a bunch of people and asked for feedback by, I think, the end of August. We heard from Pam Kish at Fair Housing, who gave a thumbs up, basically. We got some comments from a legal services lawyer who works on this stuff with a few questions, and, and nothing major, but, a few issues, questions that we'll revisit when we have another meeting with our working group and we talk to Margaret. We heard from, we're trying to schedule a meeting with Jennifer Hall and another woman from the Ann Arbor Housing Commission and a representative from Avalon, all of whom, as Keita pointed out, are essentially approaching it from the point of view of the landlords, and do have some questions and concerns, and we're having trouble scheduling a meeting, but we will. And we also got some comments, I think, from Aaron, although I couldn't access them. I couldn't see them. So we're gathering information. We're still going to meet and talk about it some more. And then what Keita, Leslie, Margaret, I guess we'll see what we have, see if we need to talk to anybody else, and then go forward. Does that sound right, Keita?
Or, yeah.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions about that?
Okay, well, so it's coming. Conversion therapies in kind of almost the same position. Linda, you want to talk about that one too?
Yeah. So we toyed with the idea of adding vulnerable adults to minors as people who would be protected under this ordinance. Margaret had her legal intern look into it, and she correctly pointed out that the definition that we had thrown into the ordinance was too broad, and if we're going to include vulnerable adults, it basically should include only people who have what's, at least in Florida, is called a plenary guardianship, which means they really have no control over their lives and somebody else has complete control over their lives. Because we can't tell adults who do have control over their lives that they can't go to conversion therapy. But we can say that someone who has given up control over their lives and is essentially like a minor in that way, we can protect them. So we have a choice. We can either get rid of vulnerable adults, which was going out on a limb because as far as we know, only Tallahassee has that, and it's under a Florida statute. And we can just go back to protecting minors, which is what the other cities in Ann Arbor that have this do, and I think most cities around the country that have this do. Or we can come up with a really narrow definition of what vulnerable adults is. And I sent that question to Margaret, and I think Margaret has also still needs to clean up the penalty section because I think we decided on criminal penalty, but the language that I cut and pasted and put in there might not be right. So she needs to look at it one more time and come up with a draft that works. And then Leslie has put together a list of people who worked with us on this and have expressed interest in it, and she'll send it to them for comment, and then we'll go forward. Does anybody have any thoughts, particularly on the vulnerable adults issue? No?
No.
Okay. So that's where we are.
Okay, so you have no question about either one of those two ordinances, instead, the status of those. If not, we will go on. I've got some other things we might also cover in this area. One of them is the crew report, the report that was headed by Alma Wheeler. What's the last name?
Smith? Is it Alma Wheeler Smith? No.
Yeah, I don't know. I should have checked that, but I didn't.
Yes.
Yes.
However, it's a very strong report. I sent it to everybody. And I'm wondering, it's not, as Linda said, it's a lot of it really is something that ICPOC is, it's their focus. But it is human rights, and it still involves police, involves the whole law enforcement, law enforcement in the county, which is law enforcement in Ann Arbor, and the inequities in it. And it occurred to me that a few people from HRC might want to sit and talk about it and maybe identify things that are specifically things we could pursue, we as the Human Rights Commission, and pursue it in any way. So if people are interested in that, I would be willing to, I would like to do it.
I'd like to do it also.
Keita?
I would too.
Keita?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
I haven't read the crew report that you sent, but I fairly recently I read, well, first of all, at our council meeting last night, I think one of our public commenters remarked upon statistics that had been taken about what police were responding to or the very different kinds of situations. And I feel like I read somewhere recently a curiosity about how often are police called out for a situation that turns out to be nothing, that turns out to be basically a white person who's like scared to have even seen a brown person walking down the street. Like that would be a really interesting statistic, I think, for us to understand as a community. Because I've heard anecdotally how often this happens. You know, somebody's just minding their own business, and it happens here. Like it's not just what you see on the internet someplace else. It happens here as well. I don't know how you would measure something like that, but I would be really interested in understanding, like, you know, how many police reports there are that, like, you know, all this person reported was having seen a black man and there was absolutely nothing to come of it. Like how many times has that happened in Ann Arbor? I would be interested in knowing that.
It is an interesting, I think, and it's also a problem.
Well, yeah.
Because it ends up being harassment of people of color, and that's a problem. It is not part of the crew report, however. That report is about people who've been charged.
Okay.
So it is. There are lots of things that we could be looking at. Maybe that our group, as we're looking at the crew report, one of the things it makes you think about is the things that didn't get into the crew report because no one got charged. I mean, you know, so there's a whole body of stuff there too. But let's get together and report back to the group as a whole about this. And if anybody else wants to join us, well.
Now, Leslie,
Yeah.
question. Is our working group only going to be focused on what's in the crew report?
I don't know.
Or might we tackle issues that Elizabeth just raised?
Well, I think we have to meet and decide what we want to do.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, great.
But that report it's a good start for a lot of people to do some research to find out what's really going on in terms of law enforcement in this area.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
As long as we're talking about that, I was wondering whether we should use your extensive email list to send something like the crew report out, and also to send the Ellie Savitt listening tour information out along with it. I mean, is there any reason why we shouldn't?
Is there? The people on that list, it's a varied group list of people who one of the many things that we reached out to the community about. They were interested. They're interested in human rights. They're interested in issues of racial justice, legal justice. So it may be a good list. It will probably also go to some people who aren't interested, but mostly they're people who've been interested in human rights goings on for the last couple of years. Would you like to have us send it out under the Human Rights Commission email to those people?
I think that's a great idea.
And Ellie Savitt. Linda, why don't you tell people what the Ellie Savitt thing is about in case they have.
I sent an email to everybody today. I don't know if you saw it. It's
Ellie
Savitt, the incoming prosecutor, Carol Kunke, who's the head of the circuit court, Patrick Conlon, who will be taking over the criminal court docket, and the public defender, Judah, remind me her name. It's on the tip of my tongue. Anyway, all four of them are going to go around.
Oh, I know, Delia.
All four of them are going around to various locales on various dates, and I think it's Saline, Ipsy Township, Ann Arbor's, one on Zoom, limited to 25 people each, socially distanced, to listen to concerns about the criminal justice system, I guess, in general. I'm assuming it was planned before the crew report was released, but it kind of is, I would think, partly in response to that. Anyway, it's an opportunity for people who want to express themselves. So,
and for us to listen.
Yeah.
So let's.
Yeah, Delphia Simpson. Yeah.
That's right. Thank you.
Yeah, I know Judge Kunke is part of the report says she's going to follow up with her own listening tour. So she may be combining that with this.
Okay.
But also sending it to the community.
Yeah, I mean, the listening tour is, we really want people to know so that they know when they are, I mean, that's something they can really do, you know.
Right. They can talk.
And you know, Ellie Savitt wants to spread that out far and wide so that people
Okay, so
know. I feel
you
like
don't think we need to ask him if it's, well, I mean.
Oh, absolutely not. No, I mean, I'm on one of his like working transition teams, and his email said, please share this with.
I just saw it on Facebook. It's a public thing.
Yeah, it's a public event, right? And we can include it, the Facebook post, the Facebook page post or whatever.
Okay. So we'll send that out. Okay. Another question that maybe Julie and Elizabeth know, and that is the status of the police collective bargaining agreement. Is there any news?
So we received an update from council, at council last night. So that's public. That part of it is public, and there was I don't know, what would you say? It's like a 10-minute presentation from John.
Yeah.
Maybe even 15. Like it was pretty extensive. Is it attached to it must have been attached to the council agenda at the last. I couldn't find it to read it before the council meeting. I think it came up.
I think it was added last minute.
But it should be on the agenda. Are you on labor, Elizabeth?
I am not.
I'm not either. Neither of us is on budget and labor, which is
So there's a subcommittee that looks at these things more closely, and the fact that Julie and I are neither of us on it, we're not getting a real close scrutiny of it. But I think the most interesting aspect to this is that typically these things are negotiated and the union approves it first and then it goes to council. But because of how hot this is politically and the fact that we're sort of changing, it looks different now. Like I guess typically in years past these things were passed as a matter of course and there wasn't a lot of scrutiny. Well, now there's more scrutiny. So at any rate, they don't want to waste a lot of their time. They have asked that council approve this agreement before the union approves it. I've got that right, Julie?
It's the right, because it's just the timing of it too. I think there's part of the negotiation process and where we're at that they need to have something back by X date, and that's the way the council meeting lines up, and then the next thing lines up. But there were some because maybe I can just like download quickly the document and then share it. Let me see if I can do that somehow. Just email it to everyone.
Judah, did you want to ask something?
Yeah. So this is a new TA, not the one that was reached early this year, but it's been revised.
Yeah, and that's the reason Julie's interested in sending you a presentation, because it was pretty good in highlighting some of the things that have been altered. The thing that was most memorable to me, and it was memorable because I remembered reading, I think a lot of us probably read the op-ed from the guy who used to be in the police department here about like how to fix policing.
Yeah, no.
One of the things that he had talked about was empowering police chiefs, and that looks to me to be one of the most significant changes. I guess the union had negotiated these progressive. I think it's called like progressive discipline, where you have to build these little steps, and I think the chief has been given, and in this agreement, the police chief is given a lot more discretion about, in certain cases, skipping steps or just recognizing that like sometimes a transgression is quite serious and it's not appropriate to just do these like incremental steps of discipline. Like it's serious enough that a consequence should be large. And then there was something else about, I think that the amount of time reaching back to examine past incidents, because that's the other thing, you know, if you've done something similar, or if you've had some other challenge in the last, I think it's gone from like 2 years to 4 years.
4 years, yeah.
Yeah, I'm most encouraged by the discretion that's allowed the chief. I really do feel like
my computer is now disagreeing with me, like for some
Julie,
reason. Yes.
Margaret Radaba just emailed me.
Oh, good.
She
Now
sent
my
me the
computer
link.
is like very, very unhappy that I just tried to email this thing to download and email it to myself. I don't know why.
She sent me the link and I can send it to you, but
Great, thank you. I emailed
not
it to
now.
myself, but it's really, really great.
I think, I don't think I can send it to you now, though.
You could probably email it.
Right now, huh? Would that be?
well, it is attached to Legistar, right?
Yeah, it's totally yeah, it's a
So you can find it on Legistar if you look up last night's meeting. I know Legistar is a little bit inscrutable. I find it difficult, but yeah.
Well, I have the link. I just
okay. Yeah, so it's
don't know how to do it from my phone to all of you.
right. So there were in my notes, just to get, because I actually did put in a few highlights during the presentation last night. The chief can waive progressive discipline for 3 areas: excessive use of force, mishandling of a weapon, or mishandling of evidence. So those are the 3 areas where progressive discipline can be waived. And then there was that 2 years to 4 years. I think the big disappointment to the community is going to be the union decline to bargain on releasing any records to ICPOC. On not any records, but but any sort of records with anyone's name attached to it, personnel type records. So that I think a lot of folks will be unhappy about that piece of it. And then they were going to have a group that they're going to put together to work on binding arbitration. So those are kind of
What do you mean by a group?
They are going to put a group together with, I guess, the police union, and I'm assuming probably ICPOC and maybe some city staff. They were not totally clear on that yet. To look at alternatives, but it's not in the contract. Yeah.
So arbitration is still in the contract.
My understanding is that arbitration.
Yeah, that's what I would have thought.
Yeah, but
Those are 2 significant things that they.
Very significant.
Yeah. Oh, I'm.
Well, except if the chief can have this ability to fire somebody, but then it can be overturned by an arbitrator. So it only goes so far. It's not ideal, but it's better than nothing. It's too bad about the ICPOC thing. I mean, there should be some way to attach a number to each of these.
There's got to be
So that if you see police officer number 2 coming up over and over again in complaints, there's an issue. I mean, there's got to be some creative solution.
Yes. Well, hopefully they'll find it. So we will have this.
It will be available to the public as soon as, I think it's at our next council meeting that we'll be voting on it. So council meetings are on a Monday. The agenda is posted about a week and a half prior. It's the Thursday evening, a week plus prior. So it should be posted fairly soon.
Can I ask another question? I assume this is for 3 years. They didn't decide to. Okay.
Yeah, it's for 3 years.
Okay.
And financials were pretty similar.
Can I ask a question too? I'm just wondering, are there models, more progressive models in the state of Michigan to aspire to, or is what ICPOC is doing on the leading edge?
I know there was a whole, and this is maybe someone else knows more, but part of my interest in not having a 3-year contract in addition to everything else, all the conversations that have been happening in the community, is what Dana Nessel was thinking about doing in making some changes. And I think, though, that our contract would prevent her changes from happening until that's what I'm not clear about. So part of my interest in wanting a year, but I'm not on the budget and labor, was wanting to see what was going to come out of Dana Nessel's office. And then I think that would give us a lot more leverage. But that may be happening anyway. It just might not be happening as quickly as we want.
Who is the chair of the, or who is on the Labor Commission? Who do we go to if we look at this and decide we wanted to respond in some way? Make some suggestions.
I know. I mean, it's going to be all public, though, so you could go to basically all of council at this point, I would say. But I can get that answer for you very easily.
Yeah, Dilip, I don't know for a fact, but I'd be very surprised to learn that any police contract in the state doesn't have binding arbitration. I think it's universal.
I think you're right. Yeah. I think that is the thing that will be the hardest to change, because I think it's statewide. I think it's a law. Dilip, did you hear Judah's question? You just came back, right?
Just wasn't a question, just a comment.
Just a comment.
Yeah. No, I was just wondering if there were more progressive police contracts in the state.
Don't know. But
That's
I know,
probably a question. That's probably a question for Margaret.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, it's something we will probably look into this month. Not as a group, but I don't know. Do you think we should weigh on? Well, we better read it. We don't know.
Do you know when it's coming up for a vote? Is it the next council meeting then?
She said,
Did you say? In like 2 weeks?
I thought so.
You just had a meeting.
It was in the, yeah, it was late. And I apologize. I don't know why it should be really, oh, here we go. Budget and Labor Committee. I just want to answer that question. So that is, Christopher Taylor, Chip Smith, Jack Eaton, Ali Ramali, and Jane Lum. And then I'm just trying to pull from the, but every time I tried to open it, it was getting very angry with me. But all, and the question was, when is it coming back? I'll look in the presentation while everyone's talking and I'll circle back. I apologize.
Next meeting is the 21st.
Yeah, that's sticking in my head for some reason, but it happened, the presentation was early in the meeting and, you know, then there was a lot of stuff that happened in between. Okay.
Okay. I don't think it. So let's go on to the 188-day issue. And Keita, this is an issue you raised. Why don't you introduce it?
Well, I think that our understanding of trauma and of the impact of really being able to step forward and publicly discuss issues of human rights violations fundamentally suggests that we need to be more generous, if not leave the time unspecified. It still, in my mind, allows people that opportunity they need to come to grips with what's happened, work through any issues they might have, and take that step towards actually being willing to discuss it publicly. I think putting a 180-day ban in effect excludes those folks who perhaps have experienced the worst form of human rights violation. And I'm concerned about that. And I think that given what we know now, it's time to modernize our thinking in this area. So I would like to see us eliminate the time limit, not just expand it, but eliminate it. I know that there's always some thought that with time, evidence might become more difficult to find, people's memories fade, but my feeling is just allow that to happen rather than try to predetermine whether someone remembers or whether there are folks that can participate in furthering the investigation. Let's just hear the complaint and see.
Okay, let me just read to you what the ordinance says so that you know what needs to be changed if you want to change it. If any individual has a complaint alleging a violation of this chapter, he or she has 180 calendar days from the date the individual's knowledge of the alleged discriminatory action, or 180 days from the date when the individual should have known about the alleged discriminatory action, to file a complaint. So they have 180 days from the time it happened or from the time they should have known that it happened. If an individual fails to file a complaint alleging a violation of this chapter within the specified time frame, the complaint will not be considered by the Human Rights Commission. So we're prohibited right now from considering it. So that's what what Keita's referring to, that she thinks it sometimes takes more time. Judah?
So I have a question. I'm fairly new, and in fact, since I've been on in the COVID era, I don't believe we've talked about a single complaint. So my question is, how do we have a lot of complaints that are dismissed because they're not timely filed? Are there a lot of older, people come in 10 months or a year or whatever, and they aren't aware of the rule, and we say, sorry, we're not going to even look into that. Is that a thing?
It does happen. It does happen.
How often does it happen?
Pam, how often does it happen?
Not often. I think if memory serves me correctly, I believe there was one that we knew of that came through, and this was even prior to Denise joining us, that I recall. So there aren't a lot that are non-jurisdictional because of the time frame. That is not to say that wouldn't increase going forward. But at this time, we have had very few, and I can recall only one where the time frame was beyond what we could address.
Now, I can speak to one complaint that I received that arose from actions that took place, I think, a year ago. And I advised him to file a complaint with the HRC, but then he got back and said, it looked like it wouldn't make any difference because the time frame, right, has long expired. So that there is one.
Okay. Linda?
First of all, Judah, in answer to your question, I don't know if you know, but we have sort of like a working group of people who, when we get a complaint, take it, look at it, and divide it. If you want to be in the working group, you should say so. It would be great.
True.
Yeah.
So we don't speak publicly. We don't discuss the details of complaints. We have an annual report where we talk about the type of complaint, but we don't assign names to the complaints. So
okay.
We're sensitive to people's need for privacy.
So just for the record, the Michigan Department of Civil Rights, I think the EEOC, yes, and maybe some others, all have a 180-day limit I don't know if that's where ours initially came from. I mean, it was in the ordinance before we revised it, so I don't know what the original thinking on that was. I will say it's different from ICPOC in that, you know, every claim is against, it's not like it's all about the police, right? So they want to hear everything, no matter when it happened. So I think we're different in that way. Every time we get a complaint, we're reaching out to some entity somewhere. It's hard enough, even when it's been within, you know, the recent past, that I'm just having a hard time imagining calling, say, you know, I don't know, a landlord or an employer or something for something that happened 2 years ago, or it feels like a difficult thing to do. I'm not saying, I think the idea of just completely cutting it off and saying we can't look at it, we can't consider it, is problematic. But I don't know if there should be like I don't know if we should say we can consider it, but you know, we don't have to do a formal investigation, but not in those words. I think we do need some sort of cutoff, but not such a hard and fast cutoff, something that allows us some flexibility, because we want the information and we want to be able, as you're saying, Keita, we want, if there's a complaint from 2 years ago about a landlord or whatever, and then we get another one this year, I mean, we want to know about that because it establishes a pattern in the same way that ICPOC would want to know about it. But I do wonder about conducting an investigation about something that happened years ago. I think we get maybe one a year that we have to send away. And we've only been doing this for like 3 or 4 years now. But generally speaking, the people who come to us years later, they tend not to have claims that we can do anything about, even if they were more recent. I mean, that's just been my impression. But you know, I'm just speaking. I think that there's some room for change here, but I don't know how much.
I actually want to ask. I'm sorry, Pam. Were you about to speak? No.
I would like to speak. Yes.
Go ahead. I'll come in after.
So a couple of things. The original discussion relative to the 180 days did mirror the state and federal law, and that's what they have in place. There are some exceptions where it can be extended to 300 days, depending on the allegations. And for equal pay, it can be up to 3 years. So that's what the feds have in place. The other thing that I believe I shared with the commission at the time we made the determination for it to be 180 days is because after that time frame has expired, either with us or with the state or federal entity, the Department of Justice can still take complaints and investigate them after that 180-day expiration. So that was an option that we could then employ in sharing that information with potential claimants, that while we couldn't look into it, or the state or the federal entity, either MDCR or EEOC, they were not without recourse, because the Department of Justice is available to assist them with said complaints. And so all of that factored into our decision to have that language encompassed in our ordinance.
So the comment I wanted to make is it really seems to me that there is a great difference between hearing a complaint rooted in the structure or conduct of the city itself. Those shouldn't be sanitized because of a 180-day arbitrary rule to cut it off because we are afraid there's no way to verify or investigate the claim, when there may be records. I know the claim that I'm discussing with individual that was referred to me by Representative Yusuf Rabi is well documented and involves the planning department and I think a couple other internal city departments. And there's no way for anyone else to really investigate or intercede. And I also worry about creating this ability to sanitize some of the worst offenses because the victim is so traumatized that he or she is unable to step forward. You know, it's like you reach 180 days and you get away with whatever offense you've committed. And I just think, you know, not only do I think it's unreasonably short, but I think that it is unfair to evaluate the level of need there is for a longer waiting period, if there needs to be a waiting period at all, because we're telling people, don't bother complaining or filing, because after 180 days, we're not going to help you. So I just think, you know, there could be a great need. There may be complaints and stories and narratives that we want to know about that's going to bring to light issues of which we were unaware. And for whatever reason, the community member or the community group wasn't comfortable, didn't feel safe stepping forward in that time. I mean, I think that there are all sorts of reasons, reasonable reasons, to explain why people sometimes wait years sometimes before feeling safe enough to step forward and share what happened with them and try to seek redress. So my concern really is with the structural issues.
People may not even know about us either. That's another issue. I mean, that's when you're talking, Keita, I think that too, you know, what if they don't know about the HRC when something happens and then they find out about it later? My one question, though, Keita, is I just want to hear your thoughts on what about, I think it's fair to be concerned about the people who do come forward after 180 days or after a long period of time who really don't have enough documentation or the business has closed. What are your thoughts on how we handle those kinds of things? Because I do think that sometimes that's an issue. People forget things and that sort of thing. And so are we creating a safe space? Because I agree with you. I think we could get rid of the 180 days, but then are we also doing a disservice because we give people false hope that you know, they can come to us about something that happened 3 years ago, but the business is closed now and they want justice, but we can't give them that because we simply can't investigate something that happened so long ago because the players aren't available.
I do think that that's going to happen. And I don't think there's anything wrong with telling someone the claim can't be substantiated. But what I really value is folks' ability to have their story, their narrative recorded. Because the same thing is true for us, that's true for the police. If we don't have years of data, we won't see patterns.
Right? I agree.
And for that reason alone, I think we need to know what kind of complaints people are experiencing, right?
I have a question. I want to reinforce a lot of what Keita is saying, because it's just making a whole lot of sense to me. And I'm going to advertise my ignorance about HRC. I still feel fairly new to this board. When HRC reports its activities of the year, I presume that you're itemizing or summarizing the kinds of complaints you've received. And it strikes me that even if having a 180-day policy does discourage people from coming. But if you still feel strongly about a time frame like that making a meaningful difference in the validity of the complaint or the likelihood of it happening, it strikes me that there might be a value to simply having a record. I mean, you could record it in a specific way. Like, these are the kind we received this many. If you do record keeping like this, we received this many complaints that were beyond an 180-day time window, which we attempted to investigate these, and we were unsuccessful in investigating. Is that the kind of data that HRC keeps?
Yes, we do keep it. It's
Okay.
in the annual report. It's not detailed in the annual report, but we do know what it is.
Well, because it seems like internally, it could be 180 days, it could be 250 days, it could be anything.
Sure.
And internally, you could delineate and sort of identify, but there's not much value in literally creating a disincentive for people to report these things like that. That to me is not a good thing. And I also agree with Keita's point that some of the worst things that can happen to people are the very things that they would delay reporting, and so that's definitely not an incentive that anybody would want to reinforce, I wouldn't think.
Julie?
Sure. And we talked about this, and I don't know that it's actually come to fruition because they've really had their plates full. But when we were working on kind of tweaking what ICPOC was going to look like, we talked about having people in the community who were going to be available to, there were going to be complaints, right? And there were going to be people who were just those who could listen and hear stories, right, and collect information about patterns of things in the community.
Right.
So I do think that we could tier it somehow and just to create reasonable expectations in line with what's legal and what's not legal and in line with what happens at the state, and still create that space to document. And because there's never a promise of action, right, with any of this. It's like
that's what I was going to say. I mean, typically we get complaints about ongoing discrimination, and one of the things we can do is mediate to end it. I mean, it generally is, I'm being discriminated now in something, and we look into it and we try to stop it, or we go to the city attorney if we can't, and they intervene and stop it. And there's a penalty of $500, I think it's a day, for continuing to violate it. So the whole premise of the ordinance is based on sort of an ongoing discriminatory act that we are there to stop. So if something happened a long time ago, it's almost like that's the kind of thing you'd bring a lawsuit about because you want to get damages. It's not entirely clear to me, other than for record keeping purposes, to know what's happened in the past, what exactly our role would be at that point. I mean, I have to think this
through.
It
might be police officer number 2.
What's that?
Right. It might be like police officer number 2.
Exactly.
Just like you said, right? I mean, it might be, it might be like landlord number 3, or
right. Like you want the information.
Yeah.
But you necessarily be able to.
And there's I think it's part of like I mean, there's so much importance in just having someone listen, and there's just a lot of validation. And I think if is our role, is this the primary role, but can there be a secondary role?
Yeah. Right.
As someone who validates your story, who helps you in your own process to heal, whatever it may be. I also just want to point out, yes, the next council meeting is is scheduled to vote on the police ordinance. And actually, if you go back, even though we met last night, that would be tomorrow that they'll be posting.
Oh, okay.
So
we'll look at it.
So less than 24 hours, it should be. Yes, I'll be up there.
Margaret, did-
Philip, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I was compelled by a couple of things. One that Julie just mentioned, which is this notion of the power of listening and the healing process that can occur in that. It reminds me of the Truth and Reconciliation Committees that both the entire country of Canada had in regard to Indigenous trespasses and genocides, and then of course South Africa. But so that notion of collecting data, whether or not there's anything that can be acted upon, certainly the power of the listening and the recording is there. But then secondly, I just wanted to say, I think Kita's argument is compelling also, because the more we think about the context that we are in now, following the summer of 2020, 180 days sounds like an arbitrary number that was just thrown in there for good, practice, Robert's Rules of Order or something along that line. But doesn't make much sense in regard to human rights and in determining what has created structures of bias and inequity. So it seems to me that it makes a lot of sense. And it's also, there's an analogy here to cases of sexual misconduct, right? And our flimsy and really untrustworthy systems of whistleblower protections. We've come to see clearly that at the University of Michigan, our whistleblower protections are flimsy and broken. They don't work. People don't report. And the same is true in any institution, including the city of Ann Arbor's government or any other institution here. So it's a way of a buttress against broken or flimsy whistleblower protection laws or policies that just don't work, where people are too intimidated to report just about anything. And a way from a human rights perspective of breaking that structural problem down to at least having the power to listen and record. So I would be in favor of doing away or lengthening that sort of, arbitrary limit of 180 days simply for those reasons.
Yeah, and I want to just echo, I think that there's been some really compelling points. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, a little louder.
Just some really compelling points. And I think that, us functioning from a place of kind of trauma informed in what we do and thinking about always assuming that like a victim of discrimination is likely telling the truth. No one really wants to go on TV and tell these situations that make them vulnerable or accusing others of things. If we function from that approach, then I think this all really makes sense. And I can understand, thinking that what are we supposed to do with cases that are over 180 days? There's in terms of trauma-informed practice, there is real power in being able to tell your story. And it helps people feel better. And especially when they think they're telling it to a body that has legitimacy. So, I mean, we exist for the human rights of people of Ann Arbor.
Mm-hmm.
So just because of that alone, we should be a body that, sometimes just listens, if nothing else.
But if somebody files a complaint and we are listening to the complaint, then what happens if it's from 2 years ago? I'm just, the lawyer in me, I'm just trying to be practical about it. Again, I'm not, a lot of what you're saying, Kita, makes sense and what everybody's saying. I'm just, from a practical point of view, I'm just wondering exactly how it should be worded, or should we just get rid of the time thing? What are we promising people?
Let me suggest something, or suggest a possible path. And some of this has to do with Margaret at one point suggested something, and I'm sort of jumping off of her suggestion. What if we instead say it has to be in our literature that it has to be 180 days, but we could say preferably 180 days, or as soon as So we're not promising. And I think after, if we've got something that's old but is worth pursuing, we ought to take those on a case-by-case basis. If they're not, we record them. If we don't think there's a chance of getting any kind of penalty or any kind of mediation that would be worth it to anybody, we can tell these people that we want to, we appreciate them from coming in. We'll record it. It will inform us, and it'll be used so that we can identify patterns. But we don't think it's worth it. It can be prosecuted. Or maybe there are some things that are institutional or structural, and they are worth pursuing, even though they're later. They're older, and we have a group that makes these decisions about complaints, and I think we can do that. From what I can tell from Fair Housing and from Michigan Department of Civil Rights, they do this kind of. They know they can't pursue everything totally either, so they have outcomes also. So we would be still a safe place, and we would still be honest about what we can do and what we can't do, but we would be more humane than I think we are now with this fast rule. Does that make any sense?
It
I think-
does.
It doesn't, the language is still so, even I don't like the language. It basically says, if you don't file it, the complaint will not be considered by the Human Rights Commission. That language should be changed.
Yes.
We can rewrite this in some way or other, either get rid of the 180 days completely or soften it in some way that doesn't outright say, just don't file it. There has to be some other way of writing this.
Yeah, and we should
I don't understand why it's not possible to let someone file a complaint, and then we look into it, and if it's too stale, we tell them it's too stale. Why do we have to prevent them from presenting it to us in the hopes of having a full investigation? Things can happen 5 to 10 years ago, and you may be able to point to 3 or 4 people who are aware of it, to whom you reported it contemporaneously. And I'm concerned that we're setting up a process where victims have to conduct their own investigations and then bring us the proof before we'll hear it.
Judah?
Yeah, Keita, you made some good points. I came in thinking, what's wrong with 180 days? And now I think, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So, but I do think there should be some limit or some language that sets some expectations that stale complaints we may not be able to grant any relief, or something that we will entertain complaints, but their timeliness will be a factor in what we can do with them. I think, like Linda said, there's more language in there that needs to be done than just wiping out the time limit.
Okay. Who would like to? How do you want to have somebody rewrite this and bring it back to us? Is there everybody on board with this change? First of all,
which change?
Well, a change to rewrite this so that it is more. It's more human. It keeps the idea that we're a safe place to report.
And it also has to be written, it has to be read and written in the context of the rest of the complaint process, which says once we've gotten the complaint, we will do X, Y, and Z with it. So, you have to kind of read it as a whole and make sure the language makes sense.
So that's right, there will be some changes that have to be made.
Well, I definitely want to be on the working group.
Okay. Who else would like to be on this working group?
I would too.
Aisha? Okay.
Judah's got his hand up.
Yeah, I'd like to be on it.
Great. Okay, good. Then we'll revisit this at the next meeting or as soon as it's ready for us. Okay? Okay. Now we are at a point where Aisha is going to tell us what her proposal is. She's been working with 2 classes in School of Social Work. Aisha, it's your floor.
Yeah, thank you. Can everyone hear me, or is this? Okay, good, great. So, I am teaching 2 classes of graduate social workers this semester, and they're all policy, macro practice, kind of research-based students. And they have a project where they have to identify a community issue that has to do with equity, assess the issue, who is being affected, talk about the players involved, then recommend a solution, and talk about kind of indicators for potential success, like evaluate it. What would be evaluative kind of indicators? And I was thinking this might be a good opportunity for HRC to get information on equity issues in Ann Arbor. So they could kind of help us create a issue bank. And each group would be tasked with exploring inequity issues in Ann Arbor, and they would write us a brief paper kind of detailing an executive summary paper detailing who's being affected, and recommend an intervention or a next step that could potentially inform an ordinance. Or inform ordinances that we've already written. We can think about it in a different way. So, I mean, what I would ask from all of you is helping to think about some topics that we want more information on. And if there is potential in a future meeting to devote some time for these students to come and present to us. Briefly, maybe 10 minutes on the issue that they've researched. So that is,
Okay.
yeah. Leslie, do you want to jump in at all? Because Leslie and I have been talking about this.
Aisha asked me if I would go to her class virtually and kind of talk about the things that are going on in Ann Arbor and what kinds of issues they might be willing to, they might want to focus on. Most of these students are they're graduate students, and they're probably not from Michigan. Certainly not from Ann Arbor. So they don't know the city very well. So I sort of give them a brief overview of what the city looks like and what we're doing and what kinds of information we would like if they're going to do something that is relevant to Human Rights Commission. What kinds of things do we want to know? What kinds of issues do we would like a little bit of background for? It also occurred to me that just when we start thinking about what we want our pet projects to be in the future, we as a Human Rights Commission, this would be a way to get a sort of an overview of the kinds of projects that people might be interested in Ann Arbor. We clearly, our agenda is always filled with things that happen that are, beg our response, or at least we want to respond to them. But sometimes we often have something in the background that we work on that has to do with what we're interested in, an issue that we have decided to go on in depth. And this project, if we had some participation in this School of Social Work class, we had the benefit of getting, as she says, an issue bank, an idea of what the students dig up in their research.
And I think also in terms of for HRC, we could gain some capital and connections in terms of with different schools. Some of the students are joint law students. Some of the students are in the School of Public Health. Some are in the School of Environmental Science. And several of them have already approached me about, I'm thinking about this initiative. Would HRC be involved, be interested? So it could be beneficial for us, I think, in a variety of ways.
And maybe people on city council, maybe for other issues that are not necessarily human rights issues. the participation that we would have could be none, could be minimal. I said I'd go, so I will be a part of it, but do we want to be part of it as a Human Rights Commission group in any way? And my guess is that they would appreciate some people to be mentors to those groups if they want to. If they're doing as interested.
Yeah. I do want to jump in. I mean, they're graduate students, so they're expected to do the research, and they're expected to find out, like, they're going to be required to interview 2 stakeholders. They're expected to figure out who those people are. But if you have interest and it's not a requirement, to maybe touch base with them, would be the point person who refers them to someone in parks or, with the schools. That's the issue they're exploring. That would be great, but it's not necessary. They are expected to kind of do the research and find people themselves.
I mean, would it help, Aisha, if we just kind of, do we need to decide as a commission on issues that we care about, or could we just send suggestions to you, Aisha, and then anything? I'm not sure I completely understand what would make sense for you and your students, but I did, when Leslie sent out a note, it came up with a lot of sort of rough topics, but I'm not sure if, some of them involve history research, some of them are maybe a little more legalistic, some maybe a little more public healthy. I don't know what would fit with your students.
I think the social equity issue, it could be public health related, it could be environmental justice, it could be disparities and outcomes of the schools in the city. It could be the disparity in sentencing that we read in the Crew report, right? And they have to focus, they have to, do an assessment, which also connects the issue to history. Like, so let's say they do housing. They could look at every library and they could look at the maps of redlining. And they could connect it to our history of housing discrimination in the area. And then the demographics of who's being affected. And then they make a recommendation. So that's essentially it. But to answer your question, it could cover a broad range of anything that is a social equity issue, social justice issue.
So should we just send topics to you and then you just choose the ones that make sense? Does that work?
That'd be wonderful. And then if we do it this way, if I'm wondering, let's say students are asking me, can you point me to a stakeholder on X issue? If you guys would be okay with me emailing you and asking, I think that would be basically it. But one of the main things I really want to know from all of you is, are you okay with them taking up some time in one of our meetings to present? Because they're going to work hard on this. It's a huge project. There's going to be 8 groups total. I'm doing this across 2 classes. So that's one issue. We could break it down into 2 different meetings. But would you guys be willing to devote maybe 2 meetings? Would it be an hour of each meeting, Leslie?
I would think so. I wouldn't think you'd want more than that. What do you think?
I think so.
How many people are willing to listen to the presentations? Can you just?
Does it work logistically with your semester?
It does. I think some of the advantages of being on Zoom is potentially we could have them record it and give it to us. But they are really hyped about the potential of coming and talking to all of you. So I think, Leslie and I are going to have a session with them where they kind of do a rough draft of their presentations to us and give them feedback. If a presentation is not in a state where it can be presented, then we'll let them know. But I'll keep you all updated. We'll keep you all updated as a
How many students do you have? Did you say?
So there's 40.
Oh.
I'm going to be breaking them into groups of 5, right?
You need 8 issues.
So I need 8 issues. And Leslie and I have already written down a few, like disparity in sentencing. There was an environmental and parks issue, Leslie, that you were talking about.
You were talking about it. I don't have one.
I may have made that one up. But a few, disparity in schools in the city. I mean, maybe even like the 180 days. And one of the things they have to do when they recommend an intervention or next step, they have to look at other cities and see how they've dealt with similar issues.
Hmm.
So we'll have this issue bank of research.
So there's
Okay.
We were, yes. Whatever it is, it's got to be fairly narrow. I mean, it could be, if it's housing, you don't want the whole housing. You want maybe single family housing, maybe financing, getting financed for purchasing a house, or rental prices, or something that is manageable.
Single family zoning, I think, is the hot topic right now.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be a perfect issue. So yeah, please send me these issues.
Okay.
Either think that we should be working on, or we are working on, but we need more information about a certain aspect.
And let's that list will be interesting.
Yeah.
So you want them to send it to you?
Yeah, why don't we send it to both of us?
Okay.
So you're also on it. And then I'll talk to Leslie about scheduling the presentations for future meetings.
Okay.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I think that this is going to be an exciting opportunity for all of us.
Okay. Well, is there anything else that I forgot to get approval on the agenda? Is there anything else anybody would like to put on the agenda now that we have completed our meeting? We have time for commissioner communications. Does anybody want to communicate anything? If that is all true, then we could entertain a motion.
I was waiting, since I'm not a non-voting member, I was waiting for if anybody else wanted to talk first. I have a question, and I don't know how ridiculous a question this is, but it starts with a story. So when there's when there are items on the city council agenda that are located in Ward 4, I tend to harass Councilmember Jack Eaton and insist that we go on a bike ride and visit them. And so on Monday, we took a bike ride out by the mall, like we were on Eisenhower. And as we were going up the multimodal path, sort of between South Main and State, two young people, like children, maybe like 10 to 12, are like screaming and like running up to us and saying, stop, like help us. And it turns out like there was a man who had scared them and was harassing and yelling at them so badly that, the young boy was on a bicycle. The young girl was running on foot because she had gotten so scared she abandoned her bicycle, and they were just absolutely terrified. And we ended up approaching the man, or like we got close enough to him that he was interacting with us. He was clearly having mental health challenges, but the kids were terrified and were telling us that they had encountered this gentleman in their neighborhood before, because they lived just off on an apartment just off South Main, and they felt like he was yelling at them because they were Hispanic. And they asked us to like escort them home because they were so scared of encountering this gentleman again, because they had just sort of, anyway, like we talked to their parents. Their parents did not speak English. And I happen to have a business card, which I shared with them. And because this had happened more than once with the same person, I suggested that if they didn't want to talk to the police, like maybe the Human Rights Commission would be. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, and actually the end of the story is that Jack and I realized that it was unlikely that this family wanted to be named on a police report or put anywhere on that. And so we didn't want to just call the police because it was clear that this person had mental health issues. It wasn't a criminal kind of thing. He had his own challenges. So we biked to the police station, and this is the good part of the story. I think, like with the person we talked to at the front desk, she said, I have a contact at Community Mental Health, and we had taken a picture of this guy with our phone. And so there were these connections being made. And I guess Jack got an update yesterday that, community mental health didn't know this gentleman, but like now that they know that this is sort of where he's lurking about, because these kids have been harassed by him multiple times. Anyway, so like what I was thinking about was the Human Rights Commission. I assume that we're like ICPOC and you accept, you take complaints like anonymously, and you protect people who wouldn't necessarily want to be attached to a complaint. Is that?
We do not, first, we don't have quite as many protections as ICPOC does.
Oh, okay.
But
If somebody FOIAs the complaints, it's, I don't know, we'd have to check with Margaret, but I don't know if we could block out the names. I don't know.
Well, I guess I was just, it was an interesting situation because like we obviously wanted to talk to the police because we felt like that was an outlet to get this gentleman connected to mental health services or trying to understand.
mm-hmm.
That just seemed like an outlet for us, and it felt like it was less of an outlet, an appealing outlet to this family. And yeah, I don't know. We were in the right place at the right time because these kids were so scared, and like they were so gracious and so grateful, like that we were willing to escort them home, and like they were just so scared. It was really, this was like right, like on Eisenhower between State Street and South Main. Like I've biked that route 1,000 times, and I never would have. Well, anyway.
And frankly, that there may be complaints that we have to take where we don't take anybody's name.
Okay.
Because that could be dangerous for the complainer.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that with me. And again, this was a slightly different situation because I do believe that the gentleman who was being hostile to these kids had his own issues that he was coping with, and which I would feel a little differently about the situation if it felt like he was in his right mind. But
yeah.
I wanted to add, actually, I had a similar situation recently happen where I was in Gallup Park and a elderly man was making noises and scared some children, and they ended up, their babysitter called the police.
Okay.
And maybe raises a different issue that I don't know if we necessarily address in HRC, but like, when the police came, I thought to myself, this is going to be a bad situation potentially, right?
Mm-hmm.
Training, they could respond with fear, they could respond, with force.
Speak louder.
Oh,
see what you're saying is important.
Just, is there like a hotline in Ann Arbor that's like just a centralized system for deploying help for people who are mentally ill?
This was a discussion at the ICPOC meeting that happened at the farmers market this summer. Frances Totoro of the State Street Merchants Association, she was commenting that there was something through the county some years ago where somebody who was clearly just struggling in a way that was disruptive or problematic, they did have a hotline, and it doesn't exist anymore. And now they literally are stuck just calling the police. But I mean, it was encouraging to me to realize that, I mean, at least the person at the front desk of the police station was, her immediate thought, was like, connecting to the right person. And we were, I guess Jack got a call from the police today because he gave them his number to follow up with it. Before we left, we were told if we were ever encountered this gentleman again, to just call the police, because now they sort of, there would be sort of background understanding of the, this is somebody who needs help, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yes. So there's something to do for the mental health professional, for the perpetrator and for the victims.
Yeah.
The perpetrator, you need somebody who is hopefully not the police in a case of mental health, somebody who can respond to that. For the victim, you also need some place where they can call and be safe. And if they're, for example, undocumented, they may be afraid to call. And that was my fear in your story. They may not.
I think we have to have a methodology to accept anonymous claims. simply because of the documented evidence of ICE enforcement for undocumented residents, who are in fact taxpayers to our community. And then the other factor in that, right, it's a double jeopardy case, Elizabeth, is we have a case nationally now in Rochester where a mental health episode resulted in another death of a Black man. So, those are issues that we have to contend with as well. And that could repeat itself anywhere. So it is interesting that the police called the community mental health, because those are some of the issues across the country now, that when people are talking about shifting funds from police in cases like this to community mental health, it makes a lot more sense.
Well, and in this particular situation, I think it would have been different if we were on site and called 911 or the non-emergency and said, there's a guy yelling at children down here. He's yelling and threatening children. They wouldn't know what to expect. But we just went to the police station and explained, the crisis is past, and we were taking the time to describe as clearly as we could. And so I imagine it was just a completely different mindset where we were describing something that had happened an hour earlier versus getting an incomplete report of something that's immediate or happening right now. I mean, literally, Jack had a picture of this guy on his phone, and the officer at the front desk had him text it to her so that she could forward it to the person. She's like, I have a contact at Community Mental Health, so that maybe they could connect some dots and figure out if this guy was seeking treatment or was it needing to, if he was known to them. And unfortunately, he was not.
Interesting to see. I think beneficial. If a system like that could exist that was institutionalized or something. I think it could potentially prevent incidences of hate and unnecessary use of force. I guess this is an issue more for ICPOC, but I think it's an important issue about that. And maybe it's something that in our promotion of ourselves and in letting the community know that we're a place where people can come and make complaints, maybe that if there is a line, that responds to people with mental illness, that's something that we can promote. We can promote other resources like that exist in the community, along with promoting ourselves.
And we might consider a hotline of some sort. We've got a line. It takes messages all night, and Denise is there during the day, and she's a good listener. So it's a possibility. I don't know. I think we should talk about it, but I wanted to interrupt this discussion, even though I think this is important. But Margaret has emailed me and said that if we want, she will call in and talk to us, probably about the contract negotiations.
Yeah, she texted me to make that offer. Yeah, she was talking about the contract. I didn't mention it because we were long past.
I wrote back to her and said I would wait till I had a break.
Yeah. Okay.
But would you want her to call us? She's watching. Or do you want to wait and just, because we're almost at the end of our meeting. Wait. Read it ourselves.
Yeah, I say wait.
Yeah.
Anybody disagree? Okay, we will ask her. We don't need it right away. So I think that our group, the people who answer complaints, have some work to do. And we probably ought to get together and talk about the kinds of loose ends that we have a group that's going to deal with the the writing of the possible amending of the ordinance. But we also have some, I think, different charges to how we handle complaints. And I think we should talk about that. So I would ask you to meet also sometime before the next meeting, if that's all right with you. That's Pam and Linda, and now Judah and me, I think. Is anybody else handling complaints? I think that's the group that's left. Okay. So we're at the end of our meeting for now. Thank you for talking about that, Elizabeth. I think we will be talking about a possible hotline or something, or how, if we want to be there, become more of a safe place to report complaints than before, given that there are more complaints coming, more people feeling divided and feeling not accepted.
And I think that could be an issue that one of the groups research. So
That
I
would
would
be.
think about, as you're working in your committees and you're working on these individual projects, what would be resourceful and what would be useful. And I think if students did some research on how other cities have set something up like this, I think
That could be very helpful.
Yeah, I'll put that down on the list.
Okay. Any more commissioner communications? How about a motion to adjourn then?
I'll move to adjourn.
Second? Anyone?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Bye.
Okay. Goodbye, folks. Thank you.
Good night.
Bye.
Oh my God.